I first heard about Shield Hero a couple of years back, around the same time Goblin Slayer came out. And a lot of people were comparing it to Goblin Slayer, and there was a bit of controversy relating to it in kind of the same way there was to Goblin Slayer. I remember with Goblin Slayer, it was that the show was way darker. Like, people were expecting something to be a bit more, I guess, generic, all age friendly fantasy anime. And it turned out to be this, like, ultra violent, dark fantasy with, like, rape and all this other kind of, like, really stuff that really isn't for kids. And Goblin Slayer, I think, kind of came out that way. My understanding is Shield Hero was also a bit like that, where the show was significantly darker, more controversial than what people were expecting. And I've been wanting to watch it since then. I was just kind of waiting for a dub, and the dub came out, I think, fairly recently, so I just finally gave it a watch. Now, heading into this, all I really knew about it was that it was an Itsukai, if I'm pronouncing that properly. Someone will probably get angry at me at the comments, like they always do. But that it was an Itsukai, and that's kind of a big question mark. It's a genre I find is very, very varied in how what the kind of quality that you get out of it. Like, there's a lot of Itsukais I like. I like Sword Art Online. Um, I guess maybe it kind of depends on what actually counts as an Itsukai. Like, I don't know if something like Goblin Slayer would count because it's not people from our world going into their world, but it's very clear that that the gods are people playing a D&D game because they talk about stuff like classes. Everyone refers to each other as their race and class. They refer to like alignments being lawful good to chaotic evil. I don't know if that counts as Itsukai. I don't know if something like and you never thought there was a girl online or recovery of an MMO addict counts as Itsukai because it takes place in our world, but the MMO is a major focus of the game, and they don't truly go into another world. It's just kind of a big place where the characters meet and all these kind of things get resolved, or something like what's it called? Is it wrong to try to pick up a girl in a dungeon? Which, once again, it's not someone who gets sucked into another world, but it's based in a world where there's RPG mechanics and everyone just has a level and stat menus and can equip stuff and things like that. But there's a lot of animes in that genre. Like, I like A Wise Man's Grandson. I like And You Never Thought There Was a Girl Online. I don't know if Excel World counts as an Itsukai, Sword Art Online. There's a bunch of different ones that I like. So there's also a lot of ones I don't like. I don't even remember most of them. No Game, No Life is kind of a mixed bag. The incest and kind of harem nature of it kind of bothered me. I never really got into it. But it's not a bad. I really hated Re Zero. A lot of them I just don't even remember because they are so generic and lame. But like I said, so heading into this, I didn't really know what to expect. Was this going to be one of the good ones? Was this going to be one of the bad ones? Was this going to be kind of generic? And I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised by Shield Hero. It's very self aware. It does try really hard to kind of put a different spin on the whole isekai genre. Something that's kind of getting stale. I kind of feel like we're in the second or third generation of it, where most of the shows that take place in that genre are very self reflexive. And they kind of try to point out both the absurdities and opportunities that occur in this world. There's a certain type of fanfic. I'm not really. It's very common in Harry Potter, Naruto, Pokemon, a lot of those kind of genres, where they apply basic rationality. Like, whenever you're watching a show or a movie and you're like, why don't they just do that? Why don't they just do that? And the fanfic is basically trying to see what if you had someone who's more logical and pragmatic in the same position. And it generally leads to them just breaking canon. Like, Naruto will just use a billion shadow clones and learn everything in 5 seconds. And he'll do crazy shit with, like, uh, storage seals and just stuff like that'll happen. Or in like Harry Potter, Harry will find some way to abuse magic because magic is extremely abusable. Because there's so many things in the Harry Potter books, like the luck potion, that you could just use to do crazy stuff. And you can just set up like a lot of automated things or traps or enchantments, and Harry will just break canon by doing basic logic. Same thing in Pokemon, where just you're in a world where people don't really take advantage of the mechanics of the world. They just kind of take it at face value and go along. And Shield Hero feels very much like they got one of those people who write one of those fanfics to do this show, and that Nafumi is basically one of the MC is basically one of the authors of something like that. He very much as the main character is kind of aware that this world is different, and he's going to try to exploit as much of it as possible. And it's kind of an interesting contrast because they summon four heroes into this world, and three of them just treat it like it's a video game. And that kind of becomes a thing later on because now Fumi takes the world very seriously, and the other three are kind of retarded. And so they just like are treating this different world as if it has as if it is an RPG. So like they kill one of them kills, I think it's a dragon zombie, and then they just leave the corpse there, and then it infects the groundwater table, and it kills everybody in the nearby village. There's another guy who like assassinates the tyrannical lord, and rather than just resolving itself, it leads to civil war and anarchy, and way more people die. And they just kind of very much treat it in that fashion, whereas Nafumi's a lot more pragmatic, and he kind of, like I said, treats it more like real life rather than just a video game, and all the stuff that kind of goes along with that. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of it, just out front, is it's cool to have a main character who does basically what you as the audience are yelling at the TV. Like, just do this, and Nafumi almost always just does that. There's also a lot more of a focus on kind of the economics of this world, particularly in the first half of season one. Naofumi, the main character, doesn't really have much in the way of resources, so he has to get creative. He spends a lot of time trading, getting rewards, selling them to other people, trying to get equipment, that sort of thing. And he's just very good with logistics, and that's just something I don't really see that often. He's kind of as much of a part-time merchant as he is a hero and as he is a fighter. And another kind of interesting thing about him, and this is kind of one of the running jokes. So you have four heroes who are summoned: the sword hero, the spear hero, the bow hero, and the shield hero. And the other heroes immediately make fun of him for just getting a shield. And basically everyone hates him. He's kind of like the Aquaman of the team. Even the people who don't think he's evil think that he's really lame and a loser. And although it's kind of funny because historically shields are better than swords. Like if you could have a choice between having a one-handed sword and a shield, you're probably better taking the shield. Because I mean, at the end of the day, a shield is a big piece of wood that often has like a metal embossing on it. And it can be pretty effective to just whack people with it. If you've ever seen The Deadliest Fail, the Spartan shield is more lethal than like the spear or sword is. You just smack people with the bronze-covered shield, and it just snaps like every bone in their body. Unfortunately, Nafumi can't do shield bash, but he has an extremely high defense stat and a lot of really good support abilities. He's also very much an int fighter, kind of like Goblin Slayer, in which even if his attack power isn't the best, because he's very creative and he's very competent, he's able to make really good use of his resources and his situation. Like, he has no attack skills, but his defense is really high. So early on, he gets low-level monsters and he just sticks them to himself, and they bite him, but they do no damage. And then in combat, he throws the monsters at people. It gets the monsters to attack for him. And that's just kind of the creative stuff that he comes up with. And once again, once he gets a party, things get a lot better. But kind of getting into the controversy, so they get summoned to the generic fantasy kingdom. And the first episode very much plays out like a generic Isekai. And it feels like it's going to just be another show like that. He gets summoned, everyone's a dick to him. They have all the adventurers who want to join the different parties. Most of them, no one wants to join his party. But then all of a sudden, like the most beautiful girl there, mine, who later it turns out to be Malty, is like, "Oh, you're so charming, Shield Hero. I'm gonna join you." And now Fumi starts out as this really idealistic. Oh, I'm gonna have my like waifu GF. I'm gonna become like the king of this world or whatever. And halfway through the first episode, Mai frames him for rape. So he literally gets Me Too'd like halfway through the first episode. And he basically, the king is like, just believes mine because she turns out to be his daughter. And all the other heroes believe her because in fantasy world, I think that their country's a matriarchy or something. So they have like believe all women. And he gets like all his shit stolen by her. They say if you manage to survive defeating the apocalyptic waves of enemies, then we're going to execute you anyways. And so now Fumi is basically slandered. No one liked him already because he's the shield hero. Everyone's trying to cheat him and take advantage of him now. And he's basically fucked because he has no ability to attack. He can't really level up. So what he's got to do is find a party. And since no one wants to join him, he does the next best thing where he goes and buys a slave. And slavery is legal in this world, and slaves have a slave crest on them, which prevents them from harming their master and forces them to do basically whatever their master tells them to do, or they suffer an immense amount of pain. So he goes to the slave trader, and so in this world you have humans and you have beastmen. Beastmen aren't really. They're not like furries. They're like. Well, you can kind of see a bit of Raphtalia in this. But they're like basically humans who have some animal characteristics. So like Raphtalia has a tail and tanuki ears. But other than that, she just looks like a human. So he finds this little beastman girl, or demi-human as they call them. And he takes pity on her because he can kind of understand being really down on your luck. And she's just like depressed. She's obviously been abused and malnourished. So he buys her for a couple pieces of silver. And now Fumi is very much a knight in sour armor because he's not a bad guy by any means. In a lot of ways, he's very heroic. He's just very grumpy, cynical, and doesn't like doing things for free. But in terms of actually achieving good things, he does a much better job than all the other heroes put together because he takes a more pragmatic view. And so he takes Raphtalia in because he needs someone to be his attacker, and he needs a slave because they're reliable and they aren't going to backstab him like his first companion did. But he's very kind to her. Like, he immediately feeds her very well. He gets her new clothing, new weapons and equipment. But he also tries to get her to immediately start fighting. And really, the only time in this series that I can determine that he uses the slave crest is when she freezes up in their first couple battles. He uses it to force her to fight, which he doesn't really hold against him because if she hadn't have fought, she might have gotten killed in those circumstances. So he basically treats her as his daughter, and it's a very kind of wholesome and heartwarming thing. And Raphtalia really kind of becomes his morality pet for the remainder of the series. Now, the problem is Beastmen grow up really fast, and their growth is based on their level. So he unlocks some ability for his shield that allows him to level Beastmen really fast. So Raphtalia, in the span of a month or two, gets leveled up, so she becomes an adult. She goes from kind of being this cute little girl to being a very attractive adult who very obviously has a crush on Nefumi. Well, not just a crush. I mean, their relationship is very wholesome and very, like, she's kind of one of the few people who can kind of see Nefumi for the person that he really is, the hero he is, underneath kind of all the grumpiness. And she does love him romantically, and that's very clear early on. Nefumi, though, has kind of become somewhat asexual after getting Me Too'd. He's just kind of lost interest in women. It's not that he's like gay or not heterosexual. It's just that soured him so much he kind of has PTSD. The other kind of issue that makes it awkward is he raised Raphtalia as basically his daughter. So now she's this really attractive Tanuki woman who's trying to get together with him. And from my understanding, in the web novel, they are the canon pairing. It's just there's a lot of kind of awkwardness to get past with regards to it. But overall, their relationship is really touching. It's kind of interesting because the king and the various members, the other heroes, keep trying to screw him. So when they find out that Raphtalia is his slave, they force him to duel one of the other heroes, and if the other hero wins, then Raphtalia gets freed from her slave crest. And she doesn't want to be freed because Naofumi, well, she's in love with him, but he's also been nothing but kind to her. And as someone whose like village had gotten destroyed and sold into slavery, the idea of becoming strong enough to fight any enemy is very appealing to her. And she just wants to be near Naofumi and uh, be with him. And so even after like they Naofumi basically says they're equal, she keeps calling him Master Naofumi because of her admiration from him as a strong male figure, which once again is something I really like. But yeah, so they force her to have a duel with. They force him to have a duel with, I think it's the Spear Hero. Yeah, the Spear Hero. And he loses because Mine, aka Multi, the girl accused him of rape, goes and intervenes. So Raphtalia gets her slave crest removed, and immediately after she gets it removed and they say she's free, she just goes back to Naofumi and she asks to get the slave crest re-added. And he's like, I don't, you're not really my slave anymore. You're my companion. I don't need to control you that way. And I think she views it almost kind of like a wedding ring or something, that it's a symbol that she belongs to Naofumi, and as long as she wears it, they're going to be together. So she winds up getting one on her again. And actually, the slave guy tries to rebuy her because she's like an attractive adult now. And then we kind of get into the third member of the party, who I really like, who's Filo. So in this world, you have Philolials, which are kind of like chocobos, but much bigger. They're kind of a mix between an owl and a chicken, and they're kind of retarded or just have a very childlike personality. So he buys a egg from the slave trader and it hatches into, well, you can kind of see her in this. She's the girl who kind of looks angelic a bit. So she winds up being this giant owl chicken who's extremely strong. Philolials have this obsession with pulling carts because I think that's what they're mainly bred for. And she starts to get depressed if she goes for a couple days without pulling a wagon. But she very quickly joins in and she just eats like crazy. And she's also special. She's much, much larger than a normal Philolial. And later on, we meet up with another giant one that kind of implies that she's some sort of royalty or she's some sort of special one. But she's interesting because she's extremely strong. They could ride on her. She can't fly despite having wings because she's kind of a chicken. But she can jump really, really high over really long distances. And she's just kind of a great addition to the party. Since Raphtalia is an adult now and you can't really have her as like the cute child figure, that's Nafumi's daughter, she kind of fills in the slot and she kind of becomes Naofumi and Raphtalia's daughter. But she's really cute. She's a bit of an airhead. I'm not sure if that's just because Philolials are like that or because she's in particular just really young. It's probably a little from column A, a little from column B. It's kind of funny because he names his Philolio Filo, so he literally just takes part of the name. And it's the kind of creativity we get from Red's team in the Pokemon Adventures manga, where he names like his Bulbasaur Soar, he names Pikachu Pika, he names Aerodactyl Arrow, and he names his Eevee V. It's that kind of level of creativity, but I like the name Filo, so it doesn't really bother me at all. So as season one progresses, you can see now Fumi gradually start to gain a following among the common people who he helps out. Now, Fumi, I'm going to do a separate character profile on him, but from what I've heard of Geralt of Riva, or however you pronounce it, He is very much a good guy, but is kind of grouchy and doesn't do things for free. And that's kind of how Nofumi is. Whenever he helps people out, he demands some sort of payment. But the payment can be just about anything. Like, at one point, he takes a cart, like a wagon, to transport all the goods he has. Or he takes a bunch of fruit, or he takes herbs, or if they don't have money, he normally will just, he kind of works on a scale where whatever the people can give him, he'll take. And because he's smart and he's good at trading and wheeling and dealing, he'll somehow make a profit out of it. So that's something I like because unlike the other heroes, he doesn't really get much funding from the crown. Because the other heroes get a lot more funding and resources from the crown, but he's kind of has to deal with things on his own. So he tends to be really stingy and cheap. And like I said, a really hard bargainer. And it's kind of in contrast to a lot of worlds where people just do things solely out of the good of their heart, where money just doesn't seem to be an issue and they just don't need to really worry about it. But Nofumi's very, very aware of that they need cash. And they do need cash. I mean, they're trying to save the world here, so they have to buy like better equipment and healing potions and food. I mean, Philo's a giant owl chicken. She eats a lot, and she's still a growing girl. I think the filial queen you see later is like the size of, I don't know, a big dragon or like a castle or something like that. So if Philo gets that big, that's going to be a lot of food that they're going to have to feed her eventually. But fortunately, Philo can transform into a human form, although they have to buy her special clothes that don't rip when she transforms, because that was kind of awkward, given how young she is and given that they would shred whenever she would transform back and forth. So yeah, like I said, as the season goes on, we see more and more. People start to gain respect for him. People start to lose respect for the other heroes. We find out that the religion in the country they get summoned to worships the three of the four cardinal heroes as messengers from God, and views the shield hero as a demon. Now, part of that is so that they have an enemy. Part of it is also the shield hero is associated closely with demi-humans. So in the demi-human kingdom, they worship the shield hero as their god and view the other three heroes as being evil. And near towards the end of the season, the queen changes the religion, so it's the Church of the Four Heroes, where they're all treated equally as holy warriors. But people tend to see him as a demon, and they keep framing him for shit that he didn't do. But by the end of season one, when the queen comes back, who's way more competent than her husband or her elder daughter, she kind of sets everything to right, and she like shows that the king and her daughter, like she gets her daughter to admit that everything she said was a lie, that he never raped her, that she tried to assassinate her sister and made Naofumi out to do it. So Naofumi finally gets the acclaim as a hero, and it's very satisfying and it's very cathartic to be able to see that, and for him to kind of take his rightful place. And the end of the season's really weird because basically all the ongoing plot threads for season one get resolved um, by like episode 20. Like they beat the big bad of season one. Naofumi gets his name cleared. And then they kind of have like this epilogue that covers a bunch of, I guess, kind of housekeeping items and then kind of introduces some of the plot points for the next season. It's kind of a weird way to do it. I guess the idea is to avoid, because a lot of shows start off with an epilogue, like wrapping up stuff from the previous season, and it can kind of be awkward and can kind of make the first half of the second season drag. So I think they just wanted to get all the outstanding like housekeeping things out of the way before they fully moved on to season two, which I think is fine. So overall, I'm gonna say I think this is a really good show. I'd highly recommend watching Shield Hero. Definitely one of the better itsukai out there and one of the better animes I've seen. Characters are all likable and have some degree of depth to them. It's very creative. Like in particular, I really like Filo because a giant chicken owl's pretty cool. Now Fumi's a likable and kind of protagonist who's a bit different. It's self-aware without getting into like absurd self-parody. Probably the only cringy thing is that the Pope is evil, but I mean that's kind of part of the core for Japanese stuff. Overall, though, highly recommended. Excellent Itsukai series. Definitely you should go watch it. So, God bless. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll talk to you later.